to the next speaker, Guru Lakshmi Viswanathan ji. Guru Lakshmi Viswanathan ji celebrates 70 years since her Arangetram. She specialized in her 20s in the Tanjavur tradition of Bharatanatyam under Guru Kanjivaram Yellappa. Recently, she received the Tagore Fellowship of the Government of India and researched Tanjavur Natyam through the ages. Lakshmi has received many awards and titles, including the Sangeet Natak Academy Award, the Kalidas Samman, and the Nritya Kalanidhi from Music Academy Madras. She has performed in over 10 centuries abroad for prestigious institutions. She is the author of 4 books: Bharatanatyam, the Tamil Heritage, a biography of M.S. Subbalakshmi, Kapaleshwara Temple, and Women of Pride, the Devadasi Heritage. Recognized as a scholar and erudite writer and speaker, Lakshmi is a specialist in the art of Abhinaya. Actually, this book, Women of Pride, the Devadasi Heritage, that I came across, I read, and that made me go to Lakshmi Viswanathan ji with folded hands to request her to speak in this symposium. Ma'am, over to you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your kind introduction. Magnum opus. I was not planning to write this at all. What happened was I was given a junior fellowship of 500 rupees a month many years ago by the Ministry of Culture. So I had met the last of the Devadasis and did my own research of the background. Basically, I am qualified to talk about the Devar Adiyargal, that is in the context of the Tamil country. So I tried to research what the background is. Basically, as you all know, the very big monument, the Tanjavur Brihadishwara temple, has a reputation for history because it has recorded the names of 400 dancers who were employed by Rajaraja Chola. Now, when I was a teenager and I learnt about this, and I visited the temple along with an archaeologist to see what this is, I was totally dumbfounded. 400 dancers employed in a temple. And that really provoked me to do the first book, Bharatanatyam, the Tamil Heritage, because I felt that there is an identity because of the background of Tamil literature, Tamil culture, and also the royal patronage. Rajaraja Chola himself was a Tamilian, but subsequently the Tanjavur dynasties were from the Telugu country and from Maratha. So you see, there has been already an amalgam in the history of the culture of Tanjavur. Telugu became the court language. So it is not surprising that many Telugu pundits and scholars moved to this kingdom to seek the patronage. For me, in my humble opinion, because I'm not a great researcher, scholar, or linguist, I think the foundation for Bharatanatyam was laid by the poetry and the music of this part of India. Without that backbone, without that melody, without that literature, an expressional art form like dance would not have been so alive, so important, and at the same time would not have survived so many centuries. We can keep on talking about Natya Shastra, and I can quote also from Silapadikaram, where Madhavi trained for 7 long years in the art of Natyam. But these are all more like mythology to us because we have not seen the actual dance of Madhavi, what she danced, or even know the songs to which she danced. We only know that she brought the element of Sringara, as Dr. Swapna Sundari mentioned. That element of Sringara was there in Madhavi's singing itself. So this connotation, the connection between music, dance, the courtesan and Sringara, this has been there from time immemorial. You cannot separate them. It is a matter of fact that the content of dance has always been dictated by the music of the dance and the lyrics of the dance. And in each century, different people compose for the dance. But this is the important part, because I always imagine that in the ancient days, because the Odwar Murtis and all the religious singers were also in the same temple as the Devadasis, along with the Periyamelam, that is the Nadaswaram party. They had great interaction, and it will not be surprising to perhaps imagine that they danced to those poems and songs which were sung from temple to temple by Navukarasar, Tirnyana Sambandar, Sundaramurti Nayanar, and so on. These are the people I've mentioned in my book also, because one of the earliest Devar Adiyargal was Paravai Nachiyar of the Tiruvarur temple. And she married the saint Sundaramurti. So you see that there is this connection between the sacred and the secular in the form of the dancer. We also know that there are certain temples which are of very particular interest with regard to the history of the Devadasis. Every temple had them, and in every age they were given a different name. So that itself to me is indicative that even their personality and character and what they did changed in each century. They were known as Rudra Ganika, they were known as Rishabhataliyar, they were known with so many names. And in the inscriptions, they are described as beautiful women, Bandar Kurali, and so on, like Chitridai Udayar, that is a slim-waisted woman. Their names are also preceded by titles. So for me, the idea of a temple dancer is one with a very high status. We read about Rajendra Chola entering the temple of Tiruvarur on a golden chariot, and sitting next to him was his favorite Devaradiyar. So this idea of a status of a dancer is something that we have to be very conscious about, because according to me, I am a modern contemporary Bharatanatyam dancer. And I truly believe that my repertoire, my training has given me that elevated status, just like music gave M.S. Lakshmi a great status. See, the divine element of music has brought status to many singers and musicians. Similarly, it is the touch of spirituality that people are associating Bharatanatyam with even today. That is the saving grace of this art form, because what happens is, I tell my friends who get amused, I said, look, we will not be talking about Devadasis if the history of this community did not say that they were courtesans. If they were just dancers, why would we even be talking about them with so much interest today all over the world? It is the idea of the courtesan that intrigues not only the male mind, but also the minds of all people, because they wonder how they combined art and this sensuality in their personal lives. Today, we dancers have completely away from the idea of the courtesan. We can only say that the courtesan dancers, the Devaradiyars, We owe them a debt of gratitude because within a short span, see, they did not dance like you and me until you were 60 or 70. Their dancing life was limited to below 20 years old. After that, they became the singers for younger dancers and continued the tradition in the family. What is important to understand about the Devadasi tradition is the highest authority in their life were two people. One is their mother, the other is their guru. Now, the Devadasis, according to my personal interaction as well as study, they owed everything to their guru. They were innocent young girls who did what they were taught, who were instructed to perform in the royal palace, in the presence of royalty, nobility, and so on. And the gurus were so particular. And here I must say that there were gurus even before the Tanjavur quartet. Otherwise, we will not find in Tulaja Sangeeta Saramrita the whole codification of the Adavus. Now we can always say Bharatanatyam came from Nataraja, Lord Nataraja. Bharatanatyam came from Natya Shastra, from Abhinaya Gupta, from every text possible. But here you have the basic structural grammar of what we identify as Bharatanatyam today. Without that identification, you cannot call it Bharatanatyam because that has all the physical parameters to define this dance form. You can compare certain postures, certain positions to sculpture, so on and so forth. But the codification was done by generations of gurus who did not dance. They looked at the students, selected the students who were Devadasis in community-wise, and chose the most talented ones to learn what they had composed. Now, the important thing to notice here is we have written records, the Modi manuscripts, and also in palm leaf manuscripts, and also, strangely and quite amusingly, by foreign writers, that certain star dancers were chosen to perform on certain occasions. We know, of course, that the names of the dancers were all written down during the Nayak times, what they danced and so on. But it was the innovation of the Tanjavur brothers and their parents and grandfather and so on to structure the dance in a formal way to suit something that has lasted to this day. Today, we talk about the Margam. If you go to an Arangetram, we see only the Margam. This is because the young Devadasis in the Tanjavur palaces were taught the Margam in a very scientific way. They had to know the Tala, the Raga, the meaning of the song, and invariably, they also know languages like Telugu, Tamil, Sanskrit, and so on, because most of the compositions are in Telugu. The beauty of the renaissance of Bharatanatyam is the fact that people in those days, it was called Madras, of course, the Rasikas were already tuned to music. They had a very good appreciation and understanding of Carnatic music in all its variety, Ragam, Tanam, Pallavi, compositions, Mummurtigal, they knew everything. One fine morning, when E. Krishnayar invited two young girls to dance in the music academy, people sat up. Why? They were seeing something unusual, but before they could even see it, they heard the music. They felt this art has to be promoted, it has to be supported, because The music was divine. And why? Because the Tanjavur quartet, after all, when they and their ancestors came to the Tanjavur palace, they may not have been greatest of singers or composers, but the Raja of Tanjore, was very smart. After all, he was an aesthete himself. We have songs praising every king written by the Tanjore quartet. The praise was not flattery. It was a fact that these Rajas were trained in music, languages, highly aesthetic. Above all, they were bhaktas. They had a reverence for the deities and the temples that had been built before them and the temples that they built themselves. So anybody connected with the temple, whether it was the Nagaswaram party or the dancers or the gurus, they respected them. They sent these gurus to learn, or rather, do their PhD. I must say they did their PhD with Muthuswami Dikshatar. Now, if you read the life of Muthuswami Dikshatar, you will understand that he was an encyclopedia of the temples of South India. He went up to Varanasi, of course, but learning from him was like reading the encyclopedia. They learned the essence of every raga. At the same time, these composers knew what lyrics are suitable for dance. They did not compose complicated lyrics. They made it simple in Telugu and also in Tamil, maybe a few Sanskrit compositions, but they concentrated on the raga bhava. People have given some explanations for Bharatanatyam being bhava, raga, and tala. That's oversimplification, but it's the truth. It has to be bhava, raga, and tala. And the Tanjore Quartet brothers had world premieres of their composition by choosing one dancer to perform their new Varnam in front of the Raja. Of course, the Varnam also had a single phrase praising the Raja, but invariably what they did was, and that was most natural and true also, that the Raja, you are great and you are a great devotee of Brihadishwara or Tyagaraja. So this link between the Devadasi showing her Shringara and her longing for the Raja's benevolence, and then praising him as the greatest intellectual, one who was giving riches to all the scholars, who went on an elephant distributing gold coins. Who is he? Mahadevuni Pujirche Sri Nide Nivera. A famous Varnam in Raga Todi. So they call the last Raja, Shivaji Raja, the boldest and greatest, but he was the greatest devotee of Mahadev. So this link has made the repertoire survive to this day. Today, if a young dancer wants to prove herself, she has to pay respect to the repertoire of the Palace Devadasi of Tanjavur. Unless she masters one of those great Padavarnams, the connoisseurs, even the lay person would look at her and say, maybe you require a little more training in the intricacies of the art. So this is like a must, because you see the language of dance is sometimes considered very simple. But if the language has grammatical mistakes, if you don't hold your body and your arm positions correctly, unless you're guided by the guru, how can you do it? So the gurus played the greatest role in the Renaissance of bringing the art of the Devadasi to the ordinary child. I say child because I clearly remember when I started learning, I was only 5 years old. And there were many young children in Madras learning from Nattuvanas. Now, the Nattuvanas brought the art from Tanjavur, from their original students, to make a living in Madras. They had a choice. They could have continued staying in the village. Like Meenakshi Sundaram Pillai said, you come here, I won't come there. In fact, he was invited by Rukmini Devi and he said he can't stay long in city like Madras. But many people went to him to learn, to master the art under very strict conditions. Now, I had dialogues with many of the last Devadasis. And some of them remembered what they learned. Many of them had forgotten everything that they had learned, but some could sing and even demonstrate. I'm not talking about whom I call the last empress, Bala Saraswati, in my book, because she was the bridge from the Devadasi tradition to the modern proscenium stage and became international. I had a dialogue with her also, and she told me that Devadasis never took the Natva symbols. They never touched the Guru's talam. They sang. They sang for their daughters or their granddaughters, but they did not take on the role of gurus. Some of them, like Mailapur Gauriamma, used to teach. She was very poor, so Rukmini Devi called her to teach in Kalakshetra, basically Abhinay. Now, Abhinayam also, many people sort of criticize the erotic element and so on. But I always tell them, Bharatanatyam has very subtle gestures. Even for the most erotic ideas, you can do things suggestively. The beauty of the padams was mainly because of the musical, the melodic aspect. If Kshetraya padams are sung beautifully today, people automatically shake their heads. And this was the repertoire of the Devadasis, not only in Tamil Nadu, but also Andhra, Karnataka, everywhere. The other famous Devadasi whom I met and interacted with was Pandanallur Jayalakshmi. Very charming woman who had stopped dancing at the age of 15 or 16. But when I met her, she was, I think, around maybe nearing 60. But one day before that, when she was in her 40s and she was still married to the Raja of Ramnad, she phoned my mother and said, today I'm going to dance in my house. Muthaya Pillai has come from Bangalore. I've practiced for a whole week. I want you all to come. It was amazing. See, she had learned when she was a little girl. Her house was 3 houses away from Meenakshi Sundaram Pillai's. Her mother was a dancer and singer. Her brother was a mridangist. And she, at a very young age, became a star dancer. She sang and danced. And for me, she also sang the Varnam, which was composed by Meenakshi Sundaram Pillai in praise of the Raja of Ramnad, Vachaspati Raga. So what I'm trying to tell you is that Devadasis were women of pride. They had pride in their art. They had pride in their status. And they were true devotees of whichever temple they were serving. Now, history has a way of going in a circle. It goes up, what goes up comes down, and then what comes down goes up again. So far as we are concerned, the art of the Devadasi, that has survived only because of the gurus teaching the young, new aspirants, all aspects of the dance. And they were very particular. We should know music, we should understand the tala, we should know the meaning. And then as we grew older, now we were talking about the erotic sensibility. It is up to mature individuals to choose what they want to present on a modern stage. Secondly, when I was very young, my teacher did not teach me any erotic padam. He was just taught small pasurams, namalvar, and so on, and some freedom songs of Bharatiyar. So we grew from that to master some of the great padams and javalis, which have a certain musical attraction. See, we may not uh, think that this has a modern context, but wherever you perform them, now I used to explain a simple javali like Nematale Mayanuda, and even a foreign audience used to think how humorous it was because the heroine says, "You promised to give me a nose ring, and what happened to the promise?" So that kind of idea appeals to people even now, except that the context of the dance is different. We no longer dance in private salons or in jamindars' houses or in weddings. That is why I say the word appropriation was very wrong, because none of the 20th century dancers or even Rukmini Devi appropriated the spaces in which the dancers before them danced. Neither did they dance in a wedding or in a procession or in a temple. And then we hear about these wonderful stories like Mailapur Gauri Ammal's mother used to dance in the Kabalishwara Utsavam. And people from all the villages around used to come just to see her Bhikshadana dance. So you see, mythology has also played a role in elevating the dance to a level of spiritual content. Otherwise, today young dancers, they like to show so many stories about Rama, Krishna, and so on. And teachers are encouraging them because they may not be able to do justice to a typical Shingara Padam. But audiences appreciate certain small gestures, certain episodes, and so on. So I would say that the contribution of the Devadasis in the last 300 or 400 years, with the association and guidance of the gurus, has helped bring Bharatanatyam to cross the bridge. I wouldn't say, according to my study, I don't think the British government objected to the dedication of girls to the temples. What they said was, why don't we try to find some other venues for them to dance? Because there was a policy in the government that all religious practices should not be interfered with. It was our own people who wanted to save the rather poverty stricken young dancers of that era of the early 20th century. And there was no romanticizing of their life at that time. Before that, their life was different. There was a lot of patronage and there was a lot of status. Like if you read some of the novels like Kotamangalam Subbu's Tilana Mohanambal, he gives a true picture of a great dancer, Mohana, but it also gives a true picture of her mother being rather materialistic and pushing the daughter to have an association with a character whom she doesn't like. So you see, these were all the realities. And there were many Devadasis themselves did not like their lifestyle in the early 20th century. But some of them survived, like Kumbakonam, Bhanumati, Lakshmi. They changed their location. They danced in Bombay, Delhi, Banaras, and so on, and earned a name for themselves. Why they did not continue is a very big question. But it was also, I think, that limitation of age. None of them were expected to dance like Balasaraswati did until a ripe old age. But that was also because she was fortunate to have the support of institutions and also foreign institutions. That didn't happen to all of them. But there is a great respect for the memory of people like Mannargudi Meenakshi, Tanjavur Jnanam, Pandanallur Jayalakshmi, Tiruvalur Tilakam, so on and so forth. We have read about them, we know what they danced. There are now photographs taken by foreigners of these beautiful dancers, but all of them very young girls, looking so innocent and beautiful that you think that today's dancers are also doing what they can for the art, because you cannot expect a change in the lifestyle of dancers today. On the other hand, being true to the art with the help of the teachers and the gurus is very important. And I think many people like Rukmini Devi also have contributed to the structure and content of the art form. Ultimately, that is what has kept the dignity of the art alive and on a pedestal. If Bharatanatyam is recognized the world over and identified as an Indian dance, it is because the technique has remained true to the rules laid out, the talent of the teachers, the strict training, and severe practice sadhana. So we learn from the lives of many Devadasis that they dedicated their life to the art. At the same time, they were also free birds because society was different at that time and patronage was different. And after all, they were very young girls. So they had a natural aptitude to enjoy life and they did that. Thank you.
Namaste, ma'am. Many wonderful points of your fact-based research on the tradition, particularly the connection between Bharatanatyam and its antecedent forms of Devadasi, particularly in the form of technique, how the point of gurus, how they codified the tradition, even without they themselves dancing, is a very interesting and wonderful point that you were making. And how the tradition was not just limited to the known texts of Bharatiya Shastra, but they were the codification continued throughout the history, and it gave a formal form into Bharatanatyam. Thank you very much, ma'am.